When speaking of Japan, some of the first thoughts that come to mind are serene images of Japan's great art history and culture. The last thing that would come to mind is crime, even more so, violent teen crime. But today we will discover an epidemic known as Kireru, which literally means to snap and become violent, something that is haunting teens throughout Japan and becoming a disturbing social reality.
Now, usually in the documentaries that I make, this is the part where I talk about my own experience with the topic of the video, but I luckily have not been murdered by a teenager in Japan, so there really isn't that to talk about. But I will say, there is violence to talk about. I have experienced violence from teens in Japan. Not personally to myself, but while I was working my ALT job, at a school down in Tondebayashi and another school out in Osaka Sayamashi. Now, Osaka Sayamashi, those kids there were super polite, great kids, always super great manners. But in Tondebayashi, I dealt with some really rough kids. During one day when I was working out there, and I don't want to say what school it wasn't Tondebayashi Junior High School, no. But I was working at a certain school out there, and I dealt with a student who had been pretty much giving the school a lot of trouble for a couple weeks. It wasn't just a rare occurrence, it was an occurrence that was happening almost weekly. What I was dealing with was this kid that was constantly throwing fits in classes, wouldn't listen. He would take out a 3DS and just start playing it in the middle of class. And you know, you're not an actual teacher when you work these jobs. As an ALT, you're an assistant language teacher. You're not a certified Japanese teacher. You're not certified in Japan. You are not an actual legal teacher at the school. You are working through a third-party contractor, and that's what I was doing. So usually you really can't lay down the law. If you try to, the kids will laugh about it because you don't really have any authority at the school. So, you know, I did what I could. I just pretty much had to ignore him. I couldn't really, yell at him, take him out of class, remove him from class, because that's something you can't do in Japan. You can't remove a kid from class. Ask any public school anywhere in Japan, and they will tell you, no, you cannot remove kids from class. The parents are sending them there because they want them to have an education, and parents will thoroughly complain if you remove them. So, you just kind of have to let him sit there and do what he wants. We had kids in that school that would do things like use curling irons in the middle of class, like just plug them into the wall in the sockets and start curling their hair. And if you'd ask them, well, what are you doing? They'd say, I'm doing it because it's cute. Kawaii dakara. And so it was, just kind of a school where it was, laissez-faire, hands off as far as rules went, and just kind of teach who would ever listen. Anyway, the one kid who was giving us a lot of trouble was pretty much escalating through the weeks. He was getting more and more troublesome to deal with. He was getting more and more aggressive with a lot of the things that he was doing, a lot of the, buttons he was pressing with teachers. And it eventually really got on the nerves of one of the very old teachers there, if I remember her name right, Miss Sakaguchi. Sakaguchi was a great English teacher, but man, she really had a passion for being strict with her class, and I respected that. I mean, this teacher really had everything in order. When this kid would try to start crap with her, she would not have it. She would come right up to his desk and knock the 3DS out of his hands, put it in his bag, and then put the book right down on top of his hands as she had to get him to start studying, to get him to start looking at work. Well, I guess one day this kid decided that he wasn't going to take that anymore, and when she did it, he reached into his bag. He pulled out the world's smallest knife. I mean, this knife was so small. It was on his key ring. It looked like maybe just a tiny X-Acto knife. And he actually ran up to her, put her in a choke, and had it to her neck. And I was actually just about to enter the classroom when I saw this erupt. I'd seen it from the window because I was about to come in and start teaching my half of the class. And I was like, holy crap. I start running down the hall faster. Lucky for me, the coach of the school runs in there before me because he's way ahead of me, and, well, let's be honest, he's more athletic too, and sprints past me, jumps in there, and you might not know this, but pretty much the coach at any school that you would teach at, junior high school, elementary school, high school, they're kind of allowed to be physical. They're expected that they can actually put the beat down. They can actually be the strictest person. They can be the person who yells and screams at kids. That's not frowned upon. For some reason, teachers aren't really allowed to get really severe with their kids when they punish them, but the coach is always allowed to do that. So this kid was able to get manhandled very quickly once the coach got in there. He put a desk between him and the teacher. He pretty much pinned him with the desk, I remember. And we had to eventually call the police and have them take him away from the school. But 2 weeks later, he was back, like nothing had happened. And I was like, isn't this like really dangerous to bring back a kid who held a knife to a teacher's neck? They're like, well, there's nothing we can do. We can't restrict him. His parents only have one school district to go to. There's nothing else we can do as far as sending him away or finding another place for him to go. So we were stuck with this kid.
Before dissecting the motives and causes behind this Kireru epidemic, let's first take a look at some cases which explore teen violence within Japan. Case number 1. The Sasebo schoolgirl murder, also known as Sasebo Joshi Kosei Satsugai Jiken, was the murder of a 15-year-old Japanese high school student, Aiwa Matsuo, by a 15-year-old female classmate on July 26, 2014. The murder took place in the suspect's apartment in Sasebo, Nagasaki Prefecture, where Matsuo was beaten with a metal tool, strangled to death, and partially dismembered and decapitated. Details. The suspect, 15 at the time of the crime but turned 16 shortly after, whose name has been protected and is still protected by the police, allegedly posted details and photos of the crime to the popular Japanese message board, Nichan, and told police that, quote, "I want to kill someone. I brought tools myself," unquote. The suspect had previously attacked her father with a metal baseball bat, prompting him and her stepmother to move her into her own apartment when she began attending high school. It is believed that she first attempted to dissect a cat and possessed several medical textbooks. Response by television and broadcasters. In response to the murder, Fuji TV canceled the July 31st, 2014 broadcast of the 4th episode of the re-edited Psycho Pass anime, which would have also featured murder of teenage schoolgirls. The aftermath. The girl's 54-year-old father apologized to Matsuo's family in 2014 about his daughter's mental health. But in October 5th, 2014, he was found dead after he committed suicide by hanging. Many believe this to be an ensaki jisatsu, which means to commit suicide for atonement of one's sins. Afterwards, a large payment is given to them via insurance, and they often give it to the family. In 2015, the Nagasaki Prefecture Child Center, whom a psychiatrist attempted to warn, were found guilty for not taking any action in this situation. Sadly, many occurrences have happened in Sasebo, including the Sasebo slashing, also known as Sasebo Shoroku Joji Dokyusei Satsugai Jiken. This was the murder of a 12-year-old Japanese schoolgirl named Satomi Mitarai by an 11-year-old female classmate. Reactions to the incident have included internet memes and a discussion of lowering the age of criminal responsibility in Japan. The murder occurred on June 1, 2004 at an elementary school in the city of Sasebo in Nagasaki Prefecture. The murderer slit Mitarai's throat and arms with a utility knife, also known as an X-Acto knife in the West. The killer's real name has not been released to the press as per Japanese legal procedures prohibiting the identification of juvenile offenders. Japanese police referred to her as Girl A. The Nagasaki District Legal Affairs Bureau cautioned internet users against revealing her photos. Murder. On June 1, 2004, the 11-year-old schoolgirl murdered her 12-year-old classmate Satomi Mitarai in an empty classroom during the lunch hour at Okubo Elementary School in Sasebo. She then left Mitarai's body and returned to her own classroom while still covered in blood. The girl's teacher, who had noticed that both were missing, found the body and called the police. After being taken into custody, she was reported to have confessed to the crime, saying, I am sorry, to the police. She spent the night at the police station, often crying, and refused to eat snacks that she was offered. She initially mentioned no motive for the killing. Shortly afterward, she confessed to police that she and Mitarai had quarreled as a result of messages left on the internet. She claimed that Mitarai slandered her by commenting on her weight and calling her a quote-unquote goody-goody. On September 15, 2004, a Japanese family court ruled to institutionalize her. Putting aside her young age because of the severity of the crime, she was sent to a reformatory in Tochigi Prefecture. The Nagasaki Family Court in 2004 originally sentenced her to 2 years of involuntary commitment, but the sentence was extended by 2 years in September 2006. On May 29, 2008, local authorities announced they did not seek an additional sentence. Reaction. The killing provoked a debate in Japan whether the age of criminal responsibility, lowered from 16 to 14 in 2000 due to the 1997 Kobe child murders, needed to be lowered again. The killer was considered normal before the incident, which made the public all the more anxious. Members of the Japanese Diet, such as Kiichi Inoue and Sadakazu Tanigaki, came under criticism for comments made in the wake of the killing. Inoue was criticized for referring to girl A as genki, which means someone who is lively, vigorous, and well-intentioned, a word with very positive connotations. Sadakazu Tanigaki was criticized for referring to the method of the killing by slitting of the throat as a manly crime. The killer became the subject of an internet meme on Japanese web communities such as Nichan. She was nicknamed Navaratan because a class photograph showed a girl believed to be her wearing a University of Nevada Reno sweatshirt. Akio Mori cited the case in support of his controversial game brain theory, which has been criticized as a superstition. The killer was reported to be a fan of the death-themed flash animation Red Room, a claim used in support of the theory. It was also known that she had read controversial novel Battle Royale and had been to many film adaptations of it, which centers on young students fighting to the death. At the March 18, 2005 Okubo Elementary graduation, students were given graduation albums with a blank page in which they could put pictures of Mitarai, the killer of the class, pictures containing both, in honor of Mitarai's death. Mitarai was posthumously awarded a graduation certificate, which her father accepted on her behalf. The killer was also awarded a certificate, as one is required in Japan in order to enter junior high school, and the school believed it would aid her into reintegrating into society. The Kobe child murders. The Kobe child murders, also known as Kobe Renzoku Jido Sasho Jiken, occurred in Kobe, Japan on March 16th and May 27th, 1997. Two victims, Ayaka Yamashita, age 10, and Jun Hase, age 11, were murdered by a 14-year-old boy under the name Seito Sakakibara, which is merely an alias, and the real name has yet to be released. The perpetrator was arrested on June 28, 1997, in connection with the Hase murder, and later confessed to both murders. As a juvenile offender, he was prosecuted and convicted as Boy A. His real name has not yet been released to the press because Japanese laws prohibit the publishing and identification. But in some weekly magazines, his real name has been reported. Beginning in 2004, Boy A was released on provisional basis, with a full release announced to follow in January 1, 2005. The murders and the subsequent release of the perpetrator gained widespread attention from Japanese media and politicians. The murders. On May 27, 1997, the head of Jun Hase, a special education pupil at Ta-ino-hata Elementary School, was found in front of the school gate hours before pupils arrived for classes. Hase had been beheaded with a handsaw, with further mutilation being done before being left in front of the school for students to discover when they arrived in the morning. A note written in red pen was found stuffed in his mouth, identifying the killer as Sakakibara. The note read, quote, "This is the beginning of the game. Try to stop me if you can, stupid police. I desperately want to see people die. It is a thrill for me to commit murder. A bloody judgment is needed for my years of great bitterness, end quote. Additionally, some English was on the note as well. Police commented that the style of Hase's killing in the note was reminiscent of that of the Zodiac murders in San Francisco during the late 1960s. On June 6, a letter was sent to the newspaper Kobe Shimbun in which Sakakibara claimed responsibility for the slaying and decapitation of Jun Hase and threatened that more killings would follow. This second letter, delivered in a brown envelope postmarked June 3rd, had no return address or name. Enclosed was a 3-page, 1,400 letter, also written in red ink, which included a 6-character name that can be pronounced as Sakakibara Seito. The same characters which mean alcohol, devil, rose, saint, and fight were used in the first message that was inserted into the boy's mouth. Beginning with the phrase, "Now it's the beginning of a game," the letter stated that, "I am putting my life at stake for the sake of this game. If I'm caught, I'll probably be hanged. Police should be angrier and more tenacious in pursuing me. It's only when I kill that I am liberated from constant hatred that I suffer, and I am able to attain peace. It is only when I give pain to people that I ease my own pain." The letter also lashed out against the Japanese educational system, calling it compulsory education that formed me an invisible person. In the initial panic, the Japanese media misreported the name as Onibara, Demon's Rose. Fuller insisted it was as he gave it. Infuriated by the mix-up, Sakakibara later wrote to the station, "From now on, if you misread my name or spoil my mood, I will kill 3 vegetables a week. If you think I can only kill children, you are greatly mistaken." In this context, the vegetables, quote-unquote, that Sakakibara meant were human. The 14-year-old junior high school student was arrested as a suspect in the Hase murder on June 28th. Shortly after his arrest, Boy A also confessed to the murder of 10-year-old Ayaka Yamashita on March 16th, as well as the assaults of 3 other girls on and around that same date. After the March 16th attack, he wrote in his diary, quote, "I carried out sacred experiments today to confirm how fragile human beings are. I brought the hammer down when the girl turned to face me. I think I hit her a few times, but I was too excited to remember." After the murders, Japanese politician Shizuka Kame called for restricting objectionable content, stating, "Movies lacking any literary or educational merit made for just showing cruel scenes. Adults should be blamed for this, and that the incident, considering the murders, gives adults the chance to rethink the policy of self-imposed restrictions on these films and whether they should be allowed to just see them because they are profitable." In 2000, the Diet lowered the age for criminal responsibility from 16 to 14. However, in the wake of the June 1st, 2004 murder of Satomi Mitarai, an 11-year-old girl known as Girl A in the Sasebo slashing, there has been some discussion for a need for a further revision. On March 11, 2004, in an unprecedented act, the Japanese Ministry of Justice announced that Sakakibara, 21 at the time, was being released on a provisional basis, with a full release to follow on January 1, 2005. Critics have charged that since the government had taken the unusual step of notifying the public that Sakakibara was likely not fit for release and should be transferred to prison in the wake of the Sasebo slashing 3 months later, this criticism was exacerbated due to the seriousness of the crimes and the fact that they had been committed by a minor. His name and new residence to this day remain highly guarded and a secret. Yet, his real name has been circulated on the internet since June 29, 1997, according to journalist Fumihiko Takayama. A number of people, including Shojiro Goto, a lawyer who dealt with many false accusation cases, and Nobuyoshi Iwata, a former principal of the junior high school that Boy A attended, insist that Boy A was wrongfully accused and point out contradictions in the statements of the investigating authorities. For example, point 1, police investigators said that one of the murders was made by a left-handed person and Boy A is right-handed. Boy A's confession contained many absurd statements and claims of things that would be impossible for a 14-year-old to do. Boy A had bad grades, and yet his confession was complex, if not cryptic. and contain many elaborate figures of speech and similes in kanji. In 2002, the boy's mother visited him in prison and asked him if he had really committed the crimes. He affirmed to her he had. Uninformed Western media who do little to no research are quick to blame Japan's bosuzoku, or speed tribes or violence groups, for these types of teen crimes. But with just the slightest bit of research, they would find that most of these groups are dwindling to nothing. The first bosuzoku started popping up in Japan in the 1950s when Japan's automobile industry started to expand. These early hooligans were known as the Kaminari Zoku, or the Thunder Tribe. Many of these Kaminari Zoku came from lower-class families and joined up for many of the same reasons people do in all countries to join gangs. These reasons included dissatisfaction with the system, the government, or just their place in society. These members joined up to feel like they were part of something bigger while at the same time sticking it to the men. Bosuzoku membership has reached an all-time low since their peak in 1982. Along with the newer, stricter regulations imposed by police officers, there are a number of other factors to be considered. These new threats to the Japanese biker lifestyle have encouraged them to ride in smaller groups, ride scooters, or instead of motorcycles, they generally just don't use vehicles anymore, and have become far less more annoying and violent throughout all of Japan. Even their connection to big Yakuza clans like the Yamaguchi Gumi has fallen apart, as the clan itself has splintered into 10 separate groups which have slowly become obsolete. Now, most crime committed in Japan is taken over by hackers and cyber crimes. Nonetheless, violent crimes being done individually and not by groups of teens in Japan is on the rise. So what are some of the triggers that cause teen-on-teen and peer violence? Well, according to Kansai Gaidai Monitor and studies, one of the main reasons tends to be bullying in Japan. In one such case, according to the article posted by the Monitor, less than 1 year ago, a 13-year-old teen was bullied relentlessly by his tormentors, who were 3 classmates. When the bullied student sent his tormenting bullies a message saying, "I'm going to die," the reply the student got back stated, "You should die." The teen apparently jumped from a 14th-story window from his apartment before the media was able to acquire his last name. In the previous month before his death, the teen suffered verbal abuse from his bullies, which escalated to the teen being punched and kicked. The teen's arms and legs and mouth were also bound and gagged. As if this wasn't humiliating enough, the tormentors made the teen eat dead bees and even forced the teen to perform shoplifting tasks and rehearse his own death. When teachers were made aware of what was happening, they issued the tormentors nothing more than a verbal warning, which apparently did little to nothing. It was only after the teen committed suicide that the media and Japan's officials were prompted to take stricter actions against bullying. Although it is sad to say, the suicide rates and violent rates of students in Japan only shows how inadequate Japan's schools and teachers are at preventing the number of violence and bullying cases in classrooms. New laws imposed by legislature are going into effect that will help teachers spot and prevent bullying in classroom settings. This attention and grave concern mainly stems from the death of a 13-year-old teen, just 1 month previous to this article being published by Japan's real-time newspaper. The Education Board is considering putting permanent investigation teams in place worldwide to counteract the number of suicides taking place in the schools. The team of investigators takes a deeper look into finding out the case of bullying and the related suicides. Hopefully, the information the investigators learn will help prevent suicides amongst students in school settings. The Education Department was scrutinized for not responding to the student's obvious plea for help after a futile investigation was conducted. What officials did uncover was information everyone had and was already aware of had not been given to any proper officials outside of the school. The death of the 13-year-old student was a direct result and impact of continuous bullying as well as continuous neglect. Months before, the board straight-faced lied about the teen's death being related to bullying. However, it was shortly afterwards that the city officials openly admitted that bullying was in fact the main contributor of the teen's suicide and that they had done little to nothing to stop it. Finally, for the first time in Japan's history, this group of students was kicked out of their school and actually received juvenile jail time for sending this 13-year-old boy to his death via suicide. This is a landmark case in Japan and has further pushed the message that suicides, bullying, and teen violence is something that needs to be not only addressed, but counteracted with help groups, teacher motivational speeches, classroom talks, and many, many social groups within the school that not only help assist students that are looking to get out of violent situations, bullying situations, but stressful home life as well. This small documentary I have made merely reports just a few cases of teen violence, when the real issue is bullying in Japan. But that's a topic for another time on another dark side of Japan. Thank you for watching.
Let's